my next guests to begin thrashing this out. Jason Falinski, Pat Gorman. I'm not sure if the mic caught it. There was almost a guffaw from you when I read about Matt Canavan's comments on regional communities being destroyed. Is he out there spreading misinformation and fear?
Mate, look, the fact of the matter is, I say to Matt, you're a smart guy. There is a way to do this that benefits rural and regional communities. And we need you on board to come up with those solutions. Now, the NFF believes that, farmers believe that, the science says that. Stop the arguments about whether we're getting to net zero by 2050 or not, and let's talk about doing it in a manner and form that helps working Australians get what.
So what are his motives then?
I think Matt has genuine concerns about this, and he's right to ask the questions, well, how are we going to do it? And to that I say, well, Matt, come and join us and let's work out those solutions, because we can do this in a way that actually benefits Australia, Australians, and in particularly working Australians.
Your view on what Labor's going to do, because 2050 is fine, you can make the pledge, you can't really be held responsible for it. I don't think you'll still be in Parliament then. I'm going to make that bold prediction.
I think you are right on that, Tom.
So 2035...
I don't. I think he'll still be here in 2060.
He might.
Jason's got more chance than
you might be father of the house by then, but 2035
father of the house.
Where the rubber hits the road. Is Labor going to be scared off again by, this is going to cost Australia, or are you willing to set a bold target and outbid the coalition? How do you see the politics in this?
I think, firstly, if you look at how Labor has approached every election over the last decade, we have
a division.
We've taken strong action on climate change.
We will do anything
You
every election.
You can keep talking. You've got your microphones on. You better walk out the door. Maybe you should keep them on in the division, because the way this panel goes, it always gets stopped somehow. There they go, in front of the camera. Oh, well, there we go. OK, we might be back with Jason and Patrick. We'll see. All right, well, we've had some divisions, some changes in schedules of guests, so we've just got them all in here because
it's a mosh
why
pit.
Not? We like chaos. You've heard there, Liberal MP Jason Falinski is going to behave today. Patrick Gorman from the Labor Party and Adam Bandt, leader of the Greens. So,
bringing some dignity to the table.
Welcome to the dream team.
Yeah, welcome to the dream team.
I hope he's watched before and he knows the sort of tone that we usually hit on this, which is chaos anyway. Look, you two both had a brief hit on net zero. I'm interested in your views on this.
I promised to interrupt only 3 times, so you should be fine.
I'm interested in your view on this side, though, on how much we're not talking about China and it's still classified as a developing nation, and the emissions and how much they dwarf our own. Do we need to focus more on that at these meetings?
We need to focus more on 2030. That's what we're not talking about, and that's what the G7 tried to put on the agenda. And yes, of course, we need to talk about China, and we need cooperation between China, the United States, and all the world's developed economies and developing economies in order to have any chance of tackling global warming. But the real issue is, what are we going to do by 2030? And the reason...
2035 is the next sort of agreement, because Australia won't change on 2030.
Well, no, what we do... Well, then that's the problem. And that's where Australia is being left behind by the G7 nations, who said that we need to more than double our cuts on 2005 levels by 2030. If we don't, we're giving up on the fight against climate change. Now, that was the purpose of climate meeting hosted by Biden, purpose of the G7. It is what is going to come up at the end of this year. There's a reason that the Nats might sign up to zero by 2050. It's too late by then, and it means you don't have to take action in the next 10 years.
Is 2050 a bit of a furphy, if you like? 2035 and the next commitment's going to mean a lot more.
Look, I think the transition to 2050 is clear. I disagree with Adam. In some senses he's right, which is the decisions we make today can't be baking in problems for the future. So you have to be able to say, for example, if you're going to put a gas peaker in, is it gas and diesel or is it gas and hydrogen? Because if it's gas and hydrogen, then you can, in 2030 or 2035, when hydrogen becomes commercially available, then you can switch to hydrogen, which becomes a clean fuel.
Right, and yet the Nats are talking about maybe getting more coal up.
Yeah, well,
with the Liberal Party...
But that's not going to happen, and the reason that's not going to happen is ESG investment in Australia and globally is basically saying we are not going to invest in coal-fired power stations.
And government money for that would be a red line for you?
It's a red line, yeah, absolutely.
Where does Labor sit on 2035, which you started your response to earlier?
I started by saying every election over the last decade, Labor has taken a proactive approach to climate change to each election. And we haven't done that with fights where we've got our... Jason relies on being in government on the National Party. And that's why they're hanging it over them at the moment.
And you rely on government, but with Joel Fitzgibbon.
you are the yin to Barnaby Joyce's yang. What we
thank you.
have
That's very
is sort of
kind.
like is two extreme ends. I mean, like Jason.
How dare you call me an extremist?
Yeah, Jason. Like, let's be honest. Jason is more in line with Adam's position than he is.
What are you trying to do to me? And
than
to Adam,
he
for
is
that
with
matter.
people in his coalition party room in the National Party. Like, that's the problem. But you ask
Likely
about
anything
Labor.
you need for the Senate, interestingly enough, would be help with the Greens if you get into power. So is this a time to figure out what the Greens might tolerate for 2035, how ambitious you might need to be?
Well, I think what you're going to see between now and the election is obviously the Greens, no matter what Labor says, the Greens will say it's not good enough because they have an interest. And if you look at the seats where...
Well, OK, here's
the
a
Greens
question.
party
Does
have-
Labor agree with the G7?
The G7 agreement that was put out last week was to say limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
By more than doubling emissions cuts by 2030.
And to agree to get every country to sign up to net zero by 2050. That's the principle.
And they
piece.
said 2030. You're missing the big paragraph in there. And this is Jason's point as well. If you have 2050 targets, if you stick with the terrible 2030 targets you guys have got at the moment, then you're making people in the 2030s and 2040s do 3 times as much as the people in this decade now. So
No,
you're
that's
pushing
not-
the burden onto our kids,
No,
and
we're
you're
not-
ignoring it completely.
No, we're
So
not pushing-
it's not about
No, no.
saying we've got to be, about you say it's extreme. Well, you've got the Greens siding with Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, and you guys are off somewhere else,
And how did
saying,
Boris,
pushing the problem off
how
into
did
the
Boris
never, never.
Johnson get there? By replacing coal with gas and by building nuclear power plants.
68% cuts by 2030. Would you agree with
gas
his targets?
and with nuclear power plants?
Nuclear would make it easier, Adam, that.
But we've got advantages that the UK doesn't have. Last time I looked
And we
at
have
the UK,
disadvantages
it was
that
pretty,
they don't
it was
have
pretty
either.
small, pretty cloudy, and pretty rainy. Australia is blessed with the world's best sun
And that
wind.
is why we have double the investment in renewables of any other nation per capita by a factor of 2. So I go back to my question. The IEA
so let's
says
turn up the dial.
only way you can get to net zero is with nuclear power. Will the Greens come with that?
We don't
No.
need it in Australia.
No, you can't.
We don't
Well,
It's not the
need it
only
in
but that's-
Australia.
way.
No, the IEA report that everyone on the left loves talking about and says you can't have more coal,
But that's
can't
not
have more
specific to
gas.
Australia.
And
It doesn't
Well,
say-
it's a global report.
Yeah,
And by the way, Bill Gates says that
Yeah,
too.
but-
By the way, Joe Biden says that too.
But globally,
You're running
because
out of
that
people who
includes-
don't say that too.
No, but that includes every country in the world.
There's
It
you and
doesn't-
Adam at the moment not saying that.
Okay, everyone's trying to colour me here. I'm just the
Well,
journalist.
you all the time, not me. I didn't ask you.
That's true. No, but it doesn't specifically say Australia has to have nuclear to get to
No, but
zero.
it doesn't also specifically say Australia doesn't have to have nuclear.
It's not
either.
banned
So
by the
what's your
Australian
point there?
Parliament. So you saying that's something you're...
Well, I'm asking, would the Greens vote to allow at
Your
least
government's not even
exploring
trying
that?
to do that.
Well, that's
Scott
true.
Morrison
No,
doesn't
that's
even talk
true.
about doing it. What are the
No.
Greens meant to be voting on? Nothing's being put up.
Well, okay, if I put something up, will Adam vote for it?
We don't need it. We've got
So
sun,
the answer is no.
we've got wind.
Can I just be clear?
right.
No.
You talk about the IEA report, they also say
Yes.
no new investment in coal, oil and gas. We've run out of time for new investments. And yet both of you, Labor and
Sure,
Liberal...
sure.
You know what they
this week
also talk about
are
is
talking
carbon
about
capture
opening
and
up the
storage
Beetaloo Basin.
being vital to getting there, and Labor's just voted against these arena changes.
Well, ARENA's there for a specific purpose. There's a range of ways that if you need carbon capture and storage, the most obvious is actually to get those companies that need that to meet their emissions targets to have it within their own projects. And I know that's been talked about in some of the major gas exploration projects in Western
So
Australia.
it's not... But it's one of those things that's struggling so far to come on board, so doesn't it need some government
I think
help?
it's the same point that Jason makes, is that if these things are viable,
What are you trying to do to me today?
I try to highlight what every one of your colleagues knows, which is you are a sensible, rational person.
Somehow I feel
But
the
if you look
amble's
at
about to
what they say about coal-fired power stations, you do not need huge amounts of government money
All right.
to build new coal-fired
I'm just
power
conscious of the
stations.
time.
You do not need
I want to get on
huge
to...
amounts of government money to invest in these technologies. If they work, they can be factored
I want to just get
the
into New
exploration
South
projects.
Wales. Your
Yep.
favourite Premier, Gladys
Yep,
Berejiklian. Is
she
this
is.
the rubber hitting the road here? I mean, if this
Absolutely.
if this containment doesn't work,
Yep.
do you treat Delta differently? And how do you do
Well, yeah, maybe.
that? Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
But that's the thing, they have, not we, they have the systems in place, track and trace this, work out what's happening, genomic testing, all the sorts of measures you need to make those adjustments.
And so what do we
as
look
go
at?
forward.
Either you go, well, gee, we need to clamp down even quicker, or you go, we can't do eradication. What would you think?
But we've known we can't do eradication from the beginning.
Basically happening anyway, though.
Where? In Western Australia?
Well, most states are basically...
Yeah, but we know, and it still keeps popping up.
What's your view on this?
Because of quarantine failures and an unvaccinated
Oh
population.
my God, we've had,
I mean,
how many people have we had come back to Australia? 500,000 people, 28.
New South
28,
Wales.
that's a success rate better than Pat Gorman.
New South Wales is about to enter its own Morrison lockdown. I hope it doesn't. I really hope the containment it works. Having lived through it in Victoria and in Melbourne, I really hope that they get on top of it. But
If they do, does it show Victoria's been too conservative?
No, it shows that we need to speed up the vaccine rollout.
No, I understand that, and vaccine rollout clearly has an impact, but also leaders can still make decisions on health advice and how conservative they are. That's part of this
Well,
as well.
Tom, that might not actually be true. Because look at the vaccine rollout in the UK, and they're at 7,000 cases a day.
Well, you've still got some vulnerable Australians not even vaccinated.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right now, so if that were the case, then
Yeah, but
But what's your view on that? I mean, surely there is something to do with the state premiers and decisions. They need to be held accountable, and that you can be too conservative with this.
The Prime Minister said he was putting the National Cabinet on war footing to deal with the vaccine rollout and to deal with quarantine. Now, they're both federal responsibilities, right? And on both of those, that is part of the reason that we're finding ourselves in the situation in Victoria that we found ourselves in and in New South Wales.
But you're beginning
We're nearly out of time.
Yeah.
Pat, should everyone follow the WA Emperor's approach and just shut the rest of the country out?
Look, I think first principles, we should respect the state premiers and their rights to make decisions about their states. So obviously I don't want New South Wales to go into a lockdown because that means that the virus is spreading further than we would like it to. If that happens, it obviously is one very effective mechanism to prevent the spread. But the simple thing is that each of these problems will continue to happen. We'll see this time and time again, that we see breakout after breakout, and there is no vaccination schedule that is going to stop this anytime in the next 6 months. And that, for me...
Anytime in the next 6 months? Well, basically everyone will be offered one by then, won't they?
Well, I've heard these promises before, and I am very sceptical about whether the promises today will actually be delivered tomorrow and the 6 months following.
We'll have to end it there. I'm getting told to wrap. I don't want to get in trouble. But you wouldn't defend that anyway, I'm sure.
no, I would. I mean, you can't have it both ways. Anyway.
Jason, Adam, Patrick, it's been different.
It sure has. It sure has.
I'm not sure we've sold everything today, but it was...
One time only.
All right.
This is,
We'll let you get back to the Parliament.